Okay, so this is AP Dual Credit, Unit 3, Lecture 5, and this is Psychology L, Unit 2, Lecture 4. This is perception. So we've talked all about sensation. We've talked about the senses coming in. You can perceive the sun coming into my eyes right here. So we've talked about that. And now we're going to talk about perception. So perception is taking all these sensations in. And again, most of us take the sensations in the same. We're taking in the same energy, even though it may not get to us the same due to color blindness, nearsightedness, farsightedness, hearing impairment, not having certain senses. But once we get this information in, how do we perceive it? Again, if I'm someone who doesn't speak Spanish, which I am, and somebody is speaking Spanish to me, I hear "Vámonos, los lingo." I just hear noise. I hear a bunch of phonic sounds. Yet, if someone understands Spanish, they hear a story or a request for directions or whatever the case may be. We're both getting the exact same stimulus, the exact same sensation. They perceive it differently based on their experience. So we're going to talk about Gestalt, priming, and we'll look at binocular cues, and also the idea that we see in 2-dimension, but we create 3 dimensions, even though we have two two-dimensional cameras. So when we're talking about sensation versus perception, again, sensation, we're all taking in the energy the same, the light waves, the sound waves, everything else. Perception is, once I get that in, I perceive it as something that has some sort of meaning. You can both hear the exact same song. You perceive it as genius. I perceive it as crap. Now, it's the exact same stimulus coming in, but our perception is a little bit different. If you watch a program that your parents thought was funny when they were a kid, let's say you're flipping through the channels and an old episode of Three's Company or Happy Days or whatever show from the 70s, 80s comes on, and they watch it and they start laughing, and they perceive it as funny because it's connected to their memory of being a child and all these other things. You perceive it as a really bad show, and it probably was a bad show, because back in the 70s and 80s, you could have a bad show because there were only 3 channels. What else were you going to watch? Now there's so many channels and so much competition, which can also be a problem as well. But anyways, perception is in the eye of the beholder. We're all getting things into our eyes, but then we perceive it as different things. This, again, should look somewhat familiar to you from a few years ago, going viral on the internet. The color of this dress. For some people, they see it as blue and black. Some people will perceive it as white and gold. And again, this goes back to what we were talking about with color constancy, this 2 different shades of gray right there. It depends on what we look at as our light source and everything else. Where some people will see this as a very dark blue and a black with the light source coming in here. Some people will focus up here and see sort of a lighter gray, metallic brownish and a white that goes along with it. So again, this one's showing you the back and forth of the extremes. And most of us see somewhere in between that. Because again, when we say someone's colorblind, it's not an absolute color blindness, it's a level of color blindness. When we talk about nearsighted or farsighted, there's different levels of nearsighted and farsightedness, but our perception is much, much more individualistic. So when we talk about the idea of Gestalt, which we talked about when we did an intro to psychology, if you're an AP or dual, Gestalt is to take things and organize them into a whole. How do I take this information and how do I make it make sense to me? For example, if I were to show you this right here, and I go, what is this? Most of you would say that is, in fact, a pen. True. But what it truly is it's some rubber, it's some plastic, and another piece of plastic there. It's got a spring inside of it. It's ink inside of it as well. There's some printing right there. So it's got a lot of different parts to it, and a lot of different parts that are sort of individualized. If I were to open it up here, then we've got this little guy on a spring, and we could shoot him up in the air if we want to. We got a little rocket ship. But anyways, there's a bunch of little different parts to this. But we take all the parts and we put it together and we perceive it as a pen because A, that's useful to us, and B, that's what I've seen it as before. When you walk into a classroom, you go, this is a classroom, not 20 individual students and a teacher and carpet and has fibers on it. We take it as a whole because we can only process a few things at the same time. This is my signature right here. My name being Jason Porter. This is my signature. And you look at it as a whole thing and you can go, well, yeah, there's a big J and a P, and sure, that's Jason Porter. But if you look at it individually, yeah, maybe you got a J there, but this kind of looks like a C or a sideways U. This is a dominant S, and I don't know why I have the dominant S. I just always had a little sort of a, I guess that's an O-N. There, yes, we can see a P, but how is that an O? This is barely an R. Yes, I can see a cross. Maybe that's a T. Where's my E and my R there? But when you put it all together as a whole, it makes sense, and I perceive it as my signature. Be that as it may. If I ask you to read the paragraphs on the next 2 slides, everything's going to be misspelled. Everything's going to be misspelled, but you're going to be able to read it okay. Start at the beginning here. Read it to yourself. It doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be at the right place. Everything else can be completely screwed up because I don't take these things as individual letters. If the first letter right is the last letter right, or the letters in the middle, the letters are supposed to be, it's good enough. And that's why a lot of times when I read something, I don't notice a lot of misspellings because I'm not looking for it. Yet your English teacher will go, what's going on with that participle? I don't even know what a participle is, to be honest. I just admitted to my wife last night. I go, you know what? I'm 52 years old, and there's some things I don't know. I don't know when it's appropriate to use 2 with 1 O versus 2 O's. I'm still confused on that. And it would take me 5 minutes to look up a YouTube video and figure it out. But yeah, you know what? I made it this far. I'm okay with that. I'm okay not knowing certain things. I'm kind of taking pride in my ignorance. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without problems. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. When I take a look at words, let's go back to here again. When I take a look at the word information, okay, I'm not breaking it down by letter. I'm not going I'm in something, in for, I'm in for, is there a tree? Am I in for a tree? Inform, okay, now I'm informing. No, it's information. It's all those letters combined because in my lifetime, I've read the word 1,000 times. Okay, so even if the A and the M are mixed up, it's still going to be information because it is close enough. We take in things as a whole, very iconic. So we take in something, I've seen this image before, I've seen this poster before, even if the details aren't there, I can tell this is from Star Wars, very iconic, 1977, Luke and Leia, Vader and Han, all those things, all involved. But if you blow it up, and you start to look at the details, you start to see, wait a second, these are actually individual scenes from the movie that are making up all these little parts. But I don't take a look at all these little parts. I take a look at them in a way where the whole makes sense and it becomes easier. So when you see these photomosaics, sorry, can't pronounce, these photomosaics, that's what they are. They're sort of a combination. I actually used to have this poster of Vader on there. I had a Yoda too. So what we're doing, we're organizing things. We capture things. We take the things that are and we capture them, and then we twist it around to make sense to what looks correct. Okay. And again, what we see is going to have a big influence on this. Actors on television, we think the sound is coming from their voice, not the fact that I've got a speaker over here, a speaker there, and a speaker down there. No, it's that voice on the screen. It's not coming from there. I'm putting it up there because that makes sense to me. A flight simulator, this roller coaster right here. This is Top Thrill Dragster going over the top in Cedar Point, Sandusky, Ohio. You know, I sort of capturing that, it makes sense that I'm there, and I feel myself twisting as I'm going down. If I've shown you the Brain Games episode, depending on which class you're in, where a woman is saying the word ba, but it sounds like ga because they show you her not making the boo sound with the B. How a food looks can impact how it tastes. We take a look at these delectable brownies right there, and oh, they're fantastic. They're gorgeous. Get that crunchy little top. I can, just that chocolate going in my mouth. And my classical conditioning, it's got the salivation going. But if I show you these brownies, it looks like poop. And therefore, that's going to have an impact on taste, as we talked about before. Vision has a lot to do with taste. Smell has a lot to do with taste. And I could have incredible chocolate in here, but the fact that it looks like poop, and I could even spray it with a smell, it's going to taste terrible. even though it could have amazing chocolate in it. We have to do something because, again, a lot of times when we're looking at things, it's how does this fit into my three-dimensional world? I've got two eyes. Most of us do. Some people blind in one eye. But both of my eyes are two-dimensional cameras, so they both take a flat picture. So in my brain, I've got to go, okay, push this stuff. Well, if you're looking here in this camera, I'm sorry. I got to figure what stuff goes into the background, what stuff comes into the foreground. Here, my hand is bigger. Here, it's smaller. You know, but even though they're the same size hands, you put them together, the same size. All right, but now this is really big and that's small. This is taking up all the space. I assume that's closer, and that's figured ground. I got to figure out what is the background and what is the foreground. So when I take a look at a two-dimensional object like this right here, all right, what do I see? Well, it depends on what's the foreground and what's the background. If I say that the background is black, I got kind of a candlestick holder. If I say the background is in fact white, then I suddenly have two faces staring at each other. If I say the background is white, there's a dog running away. But if I say the background is black, you got the profile of a lion. If I go with the background is yellow, I got Batman looking this way. If I say that the background is black, you look upside down and I got the penguin. Kind of the same thing here. Batman looking over a burning Gotham if the background is gray, but if the background is black, it's the Joker looking straight down there. I see this in very, very clear, and since I see all the details, I assume it's closer because things further away tend to be blurry. So this I put in the background, this I put in the foreground. Now, again, all these are exactly the same distance from your eyes. It's just how do you perceive it and have it make sense in your brain? And again, when you take a look at something like this, which is a little bit confusing, is the background white or is the background black? Well, that makes a big difference on, are the X's black or are they white? You know, when you look and you focus on this, you go, that's white, that's a white X. But then for a moment when it disappears, now I look at these black sort of crosses that are going, it's only an X, I guess, if you look at it that way. But again, this is something that's very, very confusing. And all it's doing is spinning and spinning back and spinning again and spinning back. But depending on, is the background black or is the background white, gives me these different images that I see. Some other examples of figure ground here. There's a woman looking at her husband and a little baby right there, as long as the background is white. But if I go, this is all the background here, I got a wolf looking up there, or a bunny rabbit, or a kitty cat, looking at these sort of humans. That are the humans the background, or are they the foreground? And this is how camouflage and all that stuff works. Again, here's another example. Is this a profile of somebody? I got half his face looking at me, or is this his profile going that direction? Half a face looking at me, or profile going that direction. Again, I got to take something that's a little bit ambiguous and have it make sense in my normal world. If I ask you what word you see here, good or evil, most of us see good because we assume that the background is in fact white. Or we could see evil if we take a look at it that way. But since I see this, I assume that's all the background and I see good. Now, some people will give you a BS thing. If you saw the word evil first, you're possessed. No, you're not. You're not. It's very similar to this image right here. First thing you see, most of us, is kind of a double back, because we look at the middle of something and we work our way out for the details. So this is the guy we show up first. But if I were to show you this exact same image slightly tilted like this, you would have noticed the angel first, even though my little demon doubles are still there. And when I saw the demon double here, the angels were still there, but that tends to be our focus. So a lot of, again, people who are into not telepathy, but mind readers, palm readers, whatever, they'll use crap like this to get you to believe in that stuff. All right. So again, what is the foreground or what is the background? That's what we're looking for. And again, some examples here of figure ground. Do I see this as two eyes, a nose, and a mustache? Or do I see this as sort of two houses and a tree stump and a guy sitting here reading a book? Is this a guy looking off in that direction, or is it a man on a horse with a lady down there? Is this a man talking to a woman with a little dead puppy over here, or the profile of somebody looking in that direction? And again, a lot of advertising likes to do this and use a little bit of figure ground. And this isn't, by the way, this isn't subliminal. It's just very, very clever way of using figure and ground. You take a look at FedEx, you'll notice the little arrow there, which is telling you it'll be delivered. Baskin-Robbins has 31 flavors. Tostitos, 2 people dipping a little tortilla chip into a bowl of salsa. Amazon has everything from A to Z, and it'll make you smile. Hershey's Kiss, there's a little kiss right there between the K and the I. Tour de France, in France, you got a guy right here and his butt riding a not a motorcycle, a bicycle. There's one wheel, there's another wheel. You ride a motorcycle, you probably win the Tour de France. The Milwaukee Brewers, one of my favorite logos in baseball, the M and the B also make a nice big mitt. The Hartford Whalers, again, another one of my favorite logos, even though they're now the Carolina Hurricane, I think. But if you would figure ground, is it a W with a whale's tail, or do we see the H representing Hartford right there? And of course, here in Wendy's, if you look at her little necklace right there, M-O-M, it's as good as mom makes food. So we want to group things in a way that they make sense. So I got to take the background and the foreground, figure what's what, but sometimes my background can get in the way of my foreground and it sort of screws up my perceptual organization. We take a look at here and I look at the background and sort of spinning and spinning and spinning and I go, okay, big spiral going all the way down. But what if I were to tell you that's not a spiral going all the way down? It's a bunch of circles that never connect. Follow me? Follow me, going around, coming right back up to where we started from. Right back up to where we started from. It's a bunch of circles that do not connect. Show you here, there's another example. Goes around like this, and it's just a circle. None of them connect, but we want to make them connect even though they don't. Here's another one. You take a look at this, there's two perfect circles, but it sort of looks like a bent up bracelet. But if I put the gold circle over the top of it, right there and right there, you can see that these are two perfectly geometric circles. But since we kind of see this twisting and these shadows and everything else, it sort of bends the way, and it bends the way that it looks because it's not supposed to be like that. Now, when it's solid, no problem. You throw those shadows in there, it goes back to that idea of color constancy and gives us that sense of motion. Here's another example. None of this is connected. And since this is very clear and that's a little fuzzy, this seems in the background, that seems in the foreground, so it seems like a pig going down. Some other examples right here, right there. Again, just a bunch of circles. None of them connect whatsoever. There's your example there. No connection there. No connection there. This is also sort of tricky. If you're looking at this on your computer screen, it sort of seems to be like it's waving. Here's another example right there, sort of looking like a wave, and this is another classic example. Because what you're doing is you're following the shadow. You're taking a look at this, and you see this little guy right here. Let's call it an almond, a half almond, if you would. This is dark, this is light. So since that's dark, the dark we tend to twist down here. Here's the light, there's the dark. So on our mind, we're sort of flipping it. We're flipping it like this, all right? Because we want, well, here, this is actually good because I got the light. If I flip it like this part of my palm goes into the light, which is coming from this source. I flip it like this, and the dark part of my hand is in shadow. So that must be further away. So what we do is as we're going around, and again, our eyes go all over the place, we're going, okay, that one is twisted, this one here is twisted like this one's here is twisted like this, but this one over here is twisted like that. And as our eyes go round and round, we get this sense of motion, even though there's no motion there. This, for some of you guys, it may be sort of making a little bit of a move in there. This seems like it's twisting just a little bit because we're going with a shadow, a little bit of a twisting going on there. Not happening. There's no vibration. There's no vibration. All these are absolutely still, but as our eyes go around them, it seems like there's movement. There is no movement. No movement, no movement, no vibration, no twisting, no blossoming, no movement there. And again, these are just all illusions. Kind of seem, especially if you focus here, the peripheral ones seem to twist because again, our peripheral vision is not really good. So we get fooled with these shadows and everything as I focus right here, and these guys seem to twist around. If I look way over here, these seem to twist a lot. Way over here, these seem to twist a lot because we're using our peripheral vision when we do that. Now, when we talk about Gestalt, we talk about grouping things together. There's different rules of grouping because again, I would need to take these two-dimensional figures and fit them in my three-dimensional world. So here we go, well, what is this stuff? Well, proximity means that things that are close together, we put together. Right here, you take a look at that, and most of us see a cube. There's a little bit of a cube. In reality, there's 8 individual shapes, but we connect them even though there's no connection there. They're close enough, let's put them together. That way I only have to define one thing instead of 8 little things, Mercedes symbol or a kind of a P symbol, whatever it is. This right here, that's a big tree instead of all these stretchy little dudes inside of it. If things are similar, if they look close enough, we go ahead and we give them the benefit of the doubt that that's what it is. We grew up making stick figures, so we go, okay, there's a big guy and 2 little guys and they're holding hands like a Red Rover game. And we don't take a look at the little details, the fact that, you know, the legs go all the way up to the armpits, the head is a third of the size of the entire body. This guy jumps and his legs make a complete rounded curvature. Doesn't matter because it looks close enough to people. Continuity. We know that if I go outside, if you go, I'm not in a box, and if I go that direction, I'm going into the rest of my house over there. And it continues into the next room, which even though I can't see the room, I know it continues on. If you're in a classroom, you look at the door, you know there's a hallway which goes out there, but it's not in of itself. And we look at that when we see pictures, you know, things continue on. Closure, we fill in the gaps. Even though there's an opening here and it blends into the background, we know that that's the back of a panda, whatever. We're going to connect things. These dots, this line, I assume they're all on the same plane, and there's 3 little barbells going on there. Other rules there that you see of Gestalt, you'd like to pause, take a look at them, etc. But these are the general rules. We want things to make sense. Again, when I take a look at this guy right here, I don't see shoulders, I don't see an elbow because it blends with the background, but I sort of fit him in. I assume his hand's not floating in the air. We take a look at impressionistic art. And even though this isn't all blended together, we go, okay, this is all light, so this all goes together. That's a little bit darker, more of a shadow. Then this is the background, and it goes with that. What do I know about light? And this would be darker. And we take it and we make it make sense to ourselves. And again, there can be some illusions that go along with this. A to B seems a little bit shorter than B to C. Not much, but a little bit. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that this is bracketed, very close, sort of put together, and the B and the C has the Y thing. It seems a little bit longer. Things like this, we don't like this, and the reason we don't like this is because you can't make it. It doesn't work in a real world. Sorry, I had to get a beverage. So as we're taking a look here, I look over here and it's very solid. I got a nice solid thing here, and that's solid, and that's solid. But then I look, wait, there's only 2. What's going on with the third? Whoa, now it became the background. So what was solid now becomes the background. This elephant's another great example of this. We take a look at the elephant. We go 1, 2, 3. Okay, 4 legs. 1, 2. Wait, why has he got 5 feet? Well, here the foot becomes the background. The leg becomes the background. The foot becomes the background. It doesn't make sense. It looks okay when you take the whole thing in, but when you look at the details, it's not following the rules of a 3-dimensional world. And by the way, if you're a fan of The Office, I think you see this hanging right by Dwight's desk. Another example here of columns becoming the background, which doesn't really make sense to us. You take a look at this picture right here, we see Albert Einstein. We take a look at that picture right there, we see Marilyn Monroe. But what we have here are 2 of the exact same, pictures. These pictures are exactly the same. But what happens is these little tiny details that are drawn in right here, you take it back, and then suddenly that's making the teeth and the eyebrows and everything else. But it's the exact same picture. All right. So again, we got to take these things, especially when we're looking at 2D, and we got to fit them in our 3D world. Most of us, when we were in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, 3D became part of our lives. We started to, sorry about that. We started to, I perceive this as a number I do not recognize, so I'm not answering it. So when we look at a Necker cube, what we've got here is, well, we used to make houses, a little box, a little triangle, a little chimney, and everything was flat. It was pretty simple to do. But then we started to decide, wait a second, I can make a cube. I can do this, and my house can have depth and all these other things. But when I make this cube, I've got to make a decision in my mind, and the decision I have to make is this the front? And it's going back this way. So it's leaving me that way. So this is in the background, this is in the foreground. Or is this in the foreground? Then I'm going back and down that way, and it's disappearing. So is this the foreground, or is that the foreground? It's one or the other, but it can't be both at the same time. And again, I can see both. but I can't see them both at the same time. A lot of people go, I see both. No, your brain is going back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. And you're processing it one way, then you're processing it the other way. And again, we're serial processors, but we can't sort of conceive that both are the same thing. In the same way back here, we can perceive, this as a solid, and this is solid, and this is solid. I perceive it as solid. Well, now I perceive it as the background, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with the Necker cube. And again, you can't, it doesn't make sense. I can't make this, or else it would look something like that. So again, we become confused when you take things that you can't make stairs that continue to go up, continue to go up, continue to go up. It doesn't make sense, even though you take a box and fold it in on itself. But these things like this, we can't make them exist in our real world. So when we see unreasonable shadowing, which doesn't necessarily go with a light source and all these other things, we look at this stuff and it just makes our mind a little bit uncomfortable because it doesn't fit in my 3D world. Here's a great example. I just saw this over the summer and put it on. You take a look right here, and this is the top of the wheel going up here, but then suddenly it becomes the bottom of the wheel and disappears. So again, bottom of the wheel here, and then it disappears and it's suddenly behind. It doesn't make sense. And since this doesn't fit logically into our world, we look at it and we're just, our brain's like, ouch. It hurts. It hurts a little bit to look at things like this because it doesn't necessarily make sense. And I'm sure most of you guys have seen art that looks like this. So again, we're going to take things and how does it fit? I take a look at, and I see it one way or the other. When we look at this, what do I see? Well, I either see a rabbit looking up that way or a duck looking in that direction. Rabbit or duck. It's rabbit, that's its ears, that's its tail, or it's duck, that's its foot, that's its tail. One or the other. And this is sort of the same thing going on. Here's another example of this sort of illusion of a rabbit or a bird. Take a look at this guy right here. Is this the beak of a bird and his eye going up in that direction that he's being petted? Or is this the head? This is like the nose of a rabbit. There's his eye looking in that direction. And those are the rabbit ears. And it kind of looks like a little bunny rabbit now too. There's another one that just showed up on the internet like a week ago. This bird, you see the bird head right there looking up in that direction. There's its feathers going all the way. But if I take that away from you and I zoom in, is this sort of a goat? There's the goat's mouth, there's his eye, there's his ear, and he's sort of twisting over the side of his head looking in that direction. Is it a goat or is it a bird? You know, again, I can see one or the other. It's hard to see both at the same time. Very famous one right here of the elderly woman, young woman. You know, you'll see, most people will perceive, okay, this is a young girl. This is the sort of the side of her face going, looking off into the distance, her nose, her ear, little necklace, her hair flows down. Or I see an elderly woman. This is her big nose, eyeball looking straight down that way. There's her chin and a smile. So I see an old woman looking down that way. So is it old woman or young woman? And there's some other versions of that exact same thing. Again, if I'm going too fast, feel free to pause and take a look at these things. If I take a look at this right here, is that Wolverine looking right at me, 2 eyes in his mouth, or is that a Batman looking at a Batman? No, I have Batman. We take a look at this. Why are they scared? Because I see a big skull, or is it Santa Claus carrying a big bag? This guy right here smiling with his big little hair and fuzzy hat, or is it this guy here with a kind of the frown and it's his hat because I flip it upside down? Do I see a man or a woman inside this mask? And again, because I see a mask and there's supposed to be a face, 2 eyes, nose, and a mouth, I'm not sure. But what if I told you it was the profile of a man? There's his nose, there's his mouth, there's his eyes, putting his lips towards a woman. There's her right eye and her mouth, and the two combined. Again, I want to see one face because that would make more sense. If I ask you how many battleships do you see right here? You see 3, you see 5, you see 2, and the answer is 1. This is one battleship. And they just happen to paint it like this because before radar, this is how you would fool the German U-boats by painting it. And they look into the distance and they're like, oh, well, that's a bunch of ships. I can't attack one ship. I can attack, not a bunch of ships. This right here, the Navy would actually, not the Navy, I'm sorry, the Army would set up these sort of fake tanks. They would set up these fake bases because that way the enemy wouldn't know where the attack was coming from. It doesn't make sense to have big inflatable tanks when you're in a plane looking down, you're in the Luftwaffe, looking down at the Americans. You just assume something that big, shaped like that, is a tank. You're not going to assume it's inflatable. Doesn't make sense. All right. So again, and again, it's no different than if you see a jug and it looks like it's full of milk and you go to reach for it, you give it a little bit of an extra oomph because you think it's full of a gallon of milk. But if it's completely empty, your arm's just going to yank right up there. So when we talk about depth perception, again, my left eye sees one picture, my right eye sees another picture, then my brain has to put them in together to sort of make sense of the world. We don't have a lot of depth perception as a child. When we're a little baby, our vision's kind of blurry as it is, and it's not until we start to become mobile and we start moving around. This is why babies will roll right off of a couch. They don't have a lot of depth perception. Then they start to crawl and they lift themselves up and their vision becomes a little bit better. They start to get better. This baby crawling across the glass right there shouldn't want to do this because this should look dangerous. That's further away than that is. You know, when the baby's a little bit hesitant about that, that means he's starting to understand depth perception. And it's the same reason why birds crash into my window, because they don't have a recognition of glass in the same way this baby and this animal do not. So when we look at things, we have what are called binocular cues. Binocular cues, next one we'll talk about monocular in the next lecture, but binocular cues, binocular two, I have two eyes. And with my two eyes, I take a picture with my left and a picture with my right, and my brain puts them together. To show you an example of this, if you put your finger straight in front of the screen and you stare at your knuckle, so stare at the back of your knuckle and there it is. Then if I ask you to look past your knuckle and look at the screen, you can actually look through your finger and see what's behind it because your left eye goes around it, your right eye goes around it. It's no different than if I put my finger out there and I close one eye, there's my finger, but then if I close the other eye, it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but it's not moving. But what's moving is the camera that I'm taking here and the camera that I'm taking over there. Then again, what my eyes do is they sort of go, you go forward, you go back. Here's another one. If I put my hands down on my side, I look straight ahead, put my hands straight up, fingers straight up, and looking straight ahead. Don't look at my hands. Don't look in the just my peripheral going on there. Look straight ahead, both eyes open, point them together, come together, boom, and we touch the two fingers. Pretty easy to do. But then if I put this hand up, close one of my eyes, then ask me to put these guys together, a lot of times we'll miss it. This will be too forward, this will be too back, or vice versa. The reason is we lose depth perception. We see things in 2D because I don't have these two different cameras taking two different pictures. This is why somebody with only one eye, if you're blind in one eye and you go to a three-dimensional movie, you take your glasses off and you see it's all sort of blurry because there's these two different images here. But if you go to a three-dimensional movie and you put the glasses on and you don't have an eye, it looks exactly like a two-dimensional movie, and you have to use monocular cues to decide where everything is, that's bigger, that's smaller, you know, and that's where you've got to make those decisions. This right here, and we'll talk about this in class, if you stare right here, this is what's called a stereogram. And a stereogram, I need to put my left eye over here and my right eye over here. And if I just sort of focus on that, focus, what appears, and this works better on a computer screen. There, I can see it now. This works better on a computer screen. I'll be interested, this will be the first year that I'll have that screen up on in my classroom. But what you can see right here is the back of a horse, a leg down there, and two legs up like this. Very similar to this horse right here. It just sort of pops up on there. You have a horse that just sort of pops up. Very, very interesting. A very interesting thing to do. And we'll work on those, I think, if we have time, we'll do those in class. So again, this is all binocular cues. When I look at something in the distance, I put my left eye over here and I put my right eye over here because I want to get these two pictures and put everything in the depth. But when I read, I converge. I put my two eyes like this because I'm reading the exact same thing. That's called convergence. Both of my eyes coming together to read. Look at something in the distance, and I want this retinal disparity. Look at something closer, and I want them to both look at the same thing. So my retinal disparity, which I'm sorry, I forgot to define back here. Your retinal disparities are difference between what your left eye sees and your right eye sees, about 2.5 inches. That's why a three-dimensional camera has two different lenses. Then what it does is it gives you the left picture, the right picture, and then it pushes some stuff forward, pulls some stuff back. You want to converge and look at one particular thing. So when you take a look at something like this looks like it's 3D. It looks like this kid's really close and this little alligator jumping is really close, but the homes in the back, they look like they're shaking a little bit, but they also look like they're in the background, because this is what my left eye sees and what my right eye sees. Because if we stop this and I pause it and I show it to you like that, this doesn't have as much depth to it because I got to use monocular cues. But when I take these two pictures, there's two pictures there and we're just sort of rotating them back and forth. When I show you the two pictures at the same time and we flip them back and forth with my left, right, left, right, left, right, since this doesn't move that much, it looks very much in the foreground. Since this moves a lot, it seems like it's in the background. This is moving a lot more than this is. This seems closer, seems further away. Two pictures of Lincoln, by the way, is about, I think, 3 days before he died. Two pictures taken from slightly different angles, flipped back and forth real quick. Suddenly it looks like he's got a lot of depth to him. You know, it looks like he's in 3D because it's just what our eyes naturally do. That ends the first lecture on perception. We'll do some stereograms in class, and then the next thing, and if you're not in class and you're not doing those, look on the internet under stereograms and they'll pop up to you. Next, we'll go over monocular cues, and we'll take a look at hard things and other things when it comes to perception. That'll be next.